Hey, welcome to Recovering from Psychiatry. My name is Laura Delano. I'm going to talk a bit about the power of psychiatric diagnosis, and I'm going to focus on my own experiences with being diagnosed, and just reflect a bit more generally and broadly about what it means to diagnose a person mentally ill. And this is a topic I'm particularly interested in because I spent a long time deeply identified with my psychiatric diagnoses, in particular with bipolar disorder. And I no longer have any kind of relationship to psychiatric diagnosis, and I don't believe in them anymore, which, is basically, it has been a complete 180 for me because of how many years I spent believing very deeply in them. When I think about psychiatric diagnosis, I immediately think back to when I was 18, and I was in a lot of pain, a lot of emotional pain. I was a freshman in college. I felt very lost in my life. I felt alone, misunderstood. I couldn't sleep at night. My mind was racing about the meaning of my life, or the lack of meaning in my life. It was, I'd plummet into these horribly depressive states where I could barely get out of bed. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Basically, every day was a struggle, and I tried my hardest to get through and to get through the pain and to, figure out how to feel better. But after months and months of trying, I basically just reached a point of desperation where I gave up. And I became convinced that I didn't have the answers to my pain, and that something was wrong with me, because, what normal human being would feel the way I feel? I mean, that's really, really how I felt. And for whatever reason, I didn't feel like I could talk about this with anyone, and I think that's a huge problem out there today, that people feel very alone with their suffering, which I think can just perpetuate the pain and make it more intense. And so I didn't talk about it with anyone. It just kept building, and I reached a breaking point, and I went back to the mental health system to which I'd been sent as a 14-year-old against my wishes. And I walked voluntarily back into the arms of psychiatry because I was convinced that they must have the answers to my pain. And I remember the amazing relief I felt after the first appointment with my new psychiatrist that freshman winter. And I remember leaving his office feeling so much hope, having tears of joy streaming down my face. And all he'd said to me was that I had bipolar disorder, and that it was a lifelong condition, just like diabetes or cancer. It was an illness in my body that was making me feel the way I was. And while I could never cure it, and while it would never go away, there was great news, because he had treatment for me, medical treatment for me. And that just filled me with so much hope. Because I didn't have to search anymore. I didn't have to to drag myself through another day of trying to find out, how to feel better. This doctor here had my answer. And I do think psychiatric diagnosis is a really, really powerful thing for people. It changed my life. Just the uttering of two words, bipolar disorder, changed everything for me. I felt like I belonged somewhere. I felt like I was understood. I felt like I could be taken care of finally. And it was a really, really powerful feeling to feel after having been in so much pain for so many years leading up to that point. So when I talk to people who are very identified with being mentally ill, I always remind myself of that, of just how powerful my diagnosis, that diagnosis was for me. as an 18-year-old in a tremendous amount of pain. And, I think a lot happened in the 10 years that followed that, that initial diagnosis that I embraced. But I think what I really want to focus on here is just what happens to a person when they internalize a psychiatric label. And I'll talk about that by focusing on what happened to me. Believing I was mentally ill changed everything about who I was. It changed the way I thought about myself. It changed the way I related to people around me. It changed the way I thought about my future. In every possible realm, becoming mentally ill just made me someone, in the snap of a finger, made me someone different. And of course, along with the label came psychiatric drugs, which I took willingly and voluntarily for years and years and years, believing that they were treating my illness. And of course, I see now how those drugs changed me too. Just like the illness label changed me, the drugs changed me too. And I think there's just tremendous power in medical language in general in our society. I think, doctors are seen as the experts on many things, and I think we defer to medical understandings or scientific understandings of the world more readily than any other kind of understanding. And I think this is very true for human experiences like emotions or thoughts or beliefs. And to internalize a mental illness label is to internalize this medicalized notion of what it means to be human. And for me, that meant that I forgot that sadness, deep sadness, persistent sadness, or incredible highs of feelings of elation, feelings of invincibility, feelings of enlightenment. I forgot that those were a part of what it means to be human, and I instead came to see them as symptoms. And, if you're seeing something as a symptom, there's only one inevitable next step, and that is treatment, because a symptom is evidence of illness or abnormality or pathology. And symptoms need eradication. And so I from age 18 on, really started to think of every facet of my experience as a manifestation of my illness in some way. And that really, I see now, closed off a lot of opportunities for exploration. Because when emotional suffering is just a manifestation of disease, then what's the point in exploring the meaning of your life, or whether you think the relationships you have are healthy, or whether you have trauma in your story. I mean, to see emotional pain as pure pathology is to rob it of its humanness. And that's what happened for me for 10 years. Every day that I felt pain, every day that I wanted to die, every day that I wanted to curl up in a ball and never leave my room, it was just another day of my disease wreaking havoc on my life. And for year after year after year, that's all I saw it as. Now that I'm out of the mental health system and off the drugs and liberated from thinking of myself as ill, I see with hindsight what a self-fulfilling prophecy becoming bipolar really was for me. I was told by some of the best psychiatrists in America that I had a lifelong illness that would keep me from perhaps, I remember one psychiatrist saying, you're going to have to set realistic expectations because you're very ill. This being told by some of the country's best doctors that this is who you are, this is who all you're ever going to be. That's what I became because I believed it's who I was. And, being told you're going to cycle from high to low, and these are episodes that you're in, and the only way to regulate them is to take medications and define the right, med regimen. That's what I ended up doing. I ended up cycling from high to low because I had placed my dependency in the drugs and in the doctors to regulate me, and I'd completely, lost touch with the fact that I was the agent in my life, and that emotions are not symptoms, and that emotions are human experiences that need to be felt, and that if I chose, I could learn how to regulate my emotions by allowing myself to feel them. I look back now and I see what medicalization did to me, and it turned me into exactly what psychiatry told me I was going to be. And that's a really hard thing to grasp when you're in the middle of it. If someone had said this to me 4 years ago, I would have said, F you, and I would have said, get out of here, I don't want to talk to you, you're insulting me, how dare you invalidate my experience, how dare you tell me my illness isn't real. I was so in it, and I was so identified with being bipolar that I just couldn't step back and see just how limiting that label was, and not just how limiting it was, how harmful and devastating it was. And I think just, to really just reduce the topic of medicalization to its simplest point, there's just no evidence to support this claim that these emotional experiences of highs and lows, or of wanting to die, or other experiences like hearing voices or having unique beliefs, there's just simply no evidence to support the claim that these are actually, medical symptoms in the first place. Everything is biology at the end of the day. Every thought I think, every feeling I feel, every time I take a step, or eat a bite of food, or talk to someone, everything is biology. Everything's driven by my brain and by the chemicals in my body. But to make the leap of to take that leap of faith, which is really what psychiatry is doing when it calls these experiences illnesses, to take that leap of faith and say intense suffering is evidence of pathology and abnormality in the brain. That presumption right there shuts off the opportunity for these experiences to mean anything else, and for suffering to be seen as a response to life, to trauma, to oppression, to loneliness, to loss of meaning and purpose. To take that leap of faith to say that emotional pain is evidence of disease is to dehumanize us as a society, as a human family, and all in the name of no science and no evidence. And if you're just on my website for the first time and you'd like to know more about what I mean when I say that, explore my resources. I've taken a lot of time the last couple of years to educate myself about this. I certainly wouldn't have accepted what I just said here to you 4 years ago if someone had said these things to me, that you don't have a chemical imbalance, there's nothing wrong with your brain, there's no evidence of any kind of pathology. I would not have been able to accept that. I would have been insulted and invalidated, in fact, and I would have probably stormed off. But I've slowly taken the time to read and learn about the narrative that we've been told as a society about human experience, and it's blown my mind to think that I spent nearly half my life thinking there was something wrong with my brain, when in fact I was having a healthy response to life, which is hard. Life is hard, and there's meant to be pain. I feel lucky now that I have the opportunity to see myself as human, as fully human. And I think talking about this topic is important to me, because I want to create the space for others to entertain that idea for themselves, especially people out there who believe their brains are broken, or people out there who work in the mental health system and who believe that their clients' brains are broken, or family members of people who've been labeled mentally ill, who believe, their children or their brothers or sisters have lifelong brain diseases, because it's just, it prevents us from it keeps us from our humanity. And and I'd like to start a conversation about it. So I encourage you to explore my resources if you'd like to learn more, or share your own experiences here at the website with medicalization and with awakening from medicalization of your experiences. And with that, I'll close, and thank you for your time, and I send you love and liberation. Good night.